Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the ProLingua Global Podcast. My name is Gabriella Ferenzi, and I run a language training company in London, UK, called ProLingua Global. In this podcast, I talk with business people who have had their fair share of intercultural experiences either in the corporate sector or when working for a small or medium-sized business or as an entrepreneur or solopreneur. In these interviews, you will hear them sharing their insights as to how understanding the language and culture of their partners, colleagues, or clients has benefited them or would have benefited them, their business relationships, and their company. You are now listening to Season 2, Episode 1, where I'm speaking with James, Director and Head of Short-Term Interest Rate Products at the London subsidiary of a German bank. James explains why he wanted to learn German despite the fact that as an English speaker he could have got away with just speaking English. He talks about the challenging aspects of learning a foreign language, like understanding different accents or speaking despite knowing that your sentence is not going to be perfect, or his German colleagues having to slow down and readjust their German to make it easier for him to understand. And he also talks candidly about the appreciation and respect he gets when German partners see him speaking their language, as well as the business and career opportunities that learning a foreign language can bring. And at the end of our conversation, James shares what strategies have worked for him when it comes to improving his German, and also how he feels about dealing with the inevitable mistakes and the occasional embarrassment that are part of the language learning process. I hope you will enjoy my interview with James. So, James, thank you very much for accepting my invitation to be interviewed on the ProLingua Global Podcast.
Pleasure.
First of all, I introduced you already in the intro section, but I want you to introduce yourself as well and maybe talk a little bit about your language background. The listeners should know that you are a client of mine and you have learned German with me for quite a few years now. And I just want you to explain why you are learning German and just generally speaking, what's your language background? What sort of languages do you speak? And what's your mother tongue, etc.?
Well, that's relatively easy. Mother tongue is English, as you can probably guess. For me, learning German with you, Gabby, was twofold. One, to prove that I could do it to myself. When I was at school, probably didn't spend as much time in lessons as I should have done. So I think it's probably taken me longer to, nowhere near mastering German, but getting to learn it has taken me longer because homework wasn't really top of my agenda when I was younger. And so it's really, I probably don't do as much homework as I should on it. Probably taken me longer, but it is something that I'm determined to try and master, if you like, and at least have a competent knowledge of a language and be able to speak to German to other people, that's for sure. Growing up, did a bit of French at school, a bit of German at school, but that was really basic stuff, learning the words for tomato, for example, and going to a market and buying one or two of them, which doesn't really help you if you want to have a conversation, quite frankly, unless, of course, you're buying tomatoes, but there you go.
It's interesting what you say. So basically, school, you did do a bit of French and you did do a bit of German, you said?
Yeah, but, being English, we're, very lazy about language. On one side, okay, it seems the rest of the world wants to try and converse in English, so that's to our advantage. But as well, on the other hand, I firmly believe that we as English, as firms, miss out on potential business opportunities, and certainly as individuals miss out on, a rich learning experience, which I've come to appreciate more later in life. And as well, the opportunities that gives you as a person going forward to, further your career, if you like.
So I have to explain to the listeners that
that your German is fantastic. And over the past, last 2 years or so, I think your vocab has massively improved. And would you agree with me that you do speak German fluently?
No, I don't agree with you.
Why is that? I'm not surprised, but why is that?
Because I still struggle sometimes. I think if you prepare, let's say a speech, or you prepare a presentation, you can rattle through that. It's no problems. You can give your thankfully for me, it's not so much of a problem as long as you remember what you're going to say. It's when you get questions fired back at you. And sometimes, okay, you can prepare yourself a little bit, but sometimes people will speak colloquially to you and you struggle with abbreviations. You might struggle certainly with accents. And it's one thing, you're with your teacher once a week or twice a week or how many times you have lessons, you get used to that accent. You get used to how, in my case, Gabby speaks and approaches things. But when you're just speaking to a person or people that you don't have perhaps that language connection with, then they can just fire things back at you. And if you come across as competent when you're giving a presentation, they presume you're competent in responding as well. And that's perhaps the hardest bit, having the confidence to do it and trying to work out what they're asking you pretty quickly to enable you to give a competent answer. So, okay, on one hand, my knowledge has improved remarkably over the last few years. I don't doubt that, but it's perhaps I lack that little bit of confidence to say that, my German is great. Maybe not. That's for others to say.
I will say it out loud. It is, but let's just continue. I'm curious why you feel the need to speak German. Obviously, you work now for a German company, and you do travel a bit back and forth. But let's be honest, you don't really need to speak German in order to
no,
to
but
do
it's
the work
helpful.
you do.
No, you're right. I don't need to. I could get away with it. Like most English, we're lazy on that front, so sure. But it's a challenge for me, and it's sometimes you just get your teeth stuck into something and you try and persevere with it and master it as best you can. So that's sort of that has resonated with me, if you like, and I want to try and see it through. It's a good thing to put on your CV. It does open up some opportunities, however small you think they are at the time. I know that people are impressed that I've got a competent level of German, and hopefully that does stand you in good stead in the coming years.
It's fascinating to hear, but at the same time, I'm curious how it has actually benefited you, in work and in your relationships. So what do you see?
Respect.
Respect. Wow.
They respect you a little bit more for being able to speak their language, and certainly when you travel abroad, if you can speak in the, obviously in this case Germany, people do respect you a bit more, and they understand that I know a little bit of German. So on the other hand, now they know that they're not quite so open in front of me because they know I understand what they're saying. So
Do you actively seek opportunities to talk to them in German? How do you approach it? Because
when I go abroad, or when I go to Germany, then I'll speak in German as much as I can. Recent visit, I guess I spoke at least 75% of the time in German. Some of the people find it hard to speak to me in German because they have to speak slower. They have to readjust perhaps their German a little bit to make it easier for me to understand. They're not quite so, they wouldn't speak in slang terms, for example, so they have to think about it a bit. But they also recognise that when they were learning English, they had to go through that process. And I still, when I speak to colleagues, I will speak slower in English, a lot slower than I perhaps am in this interview.
How do you find the confidence to speak German to them?
You just got to go for it, I guess, in simple English terms.
For many of my clients, that's a key issue. Like, they know a few basics, but they don't find, the opportunity, or they don't actively seek the opportunity to use those few words.
You've just ultimately at some point you've just got to go for it. For me, it was down the pub, and maybe a bit of Dutch courage, a couple of beers, and you're off. And I don't mean to trivialise it, but sometimes in those environments, maybe in a working environment, you're afraid to make a mistake or something. But people don't just stand and point the finger and laugh at you. They might take the mickey out of you a bit at the early, but when they realise you're actually trying and not just saying good morning, how are you, they actually think, okay, he can speak some German, let's try it. And they don't ridicule you. They speak to you, and when they can see you're struggling, then they step in and maybe speak English or maybe simplify it a little bit. And, I'm never afraid in the middle of speaking German to speak English if I need to
Exactly.
keep the conversation going.
Mm-hmm.
And they're happy to do that, but we still revert to German. But I mean, one of the other things is when you check into a hotel, for example, speak in German, give your name, say you've booked a room, things like that. But I've always found that they then wanted to practice their English on me, so they'd reply in English until you keep speaking German at them, and then they ultimately have to speak in German to you. But you've just got to go for it. Yeah. But I understand the embarrassment side of it. Yeah, that's all too real.
So how did you get to this stage in German? How did you learn, or how do you?
I did a bit at school, and then when I started working for a German firm, they offered German lessons. So I thought, okay, well, why not? Let's do it. You can't just stay at your desk all the time. So an hour here and there, or an hour a week, as was then. Yeah. Then let's give it a go.
And what do you feel like? What works for you and what doesn't work for you when it comes to learning and memorizing new? I mean, grammar, vocabulary. How do you approach the whole story? I mean, what's your secret?
I don't know. At the start, I got too het up. I mean, certainly for German, what do they say? There's like 40 ways of saying the, so it's infuriating. What's masculine, what's feminine, what's neutral. So, from that point of view, being an English speaker, that's very frustrating. But sometimes I wanted to be, I learn it because I want to converse with people. And I want to go and have a conversation with someone. And sometimes I find it quite hard if people are constantly correcting you. When you start out learning, they're constantly correcting you. There's a reason they're doing that. I prefer to let things flow a little bit and then get corrected at the end. But that's just my personal preference. Other people would see it differently, and different teachers see it differently. That's for sure. But I feel my German's benefited by being allowed just to waffle on, make mistakes, and then correcting them at the end, rather than speak 4 words. You haven't put the correct ending on, or you've given something a feminine. It's D rather than dare, or whatever it might be. Yeah. And because at the end of the day, if you're conversing with someone, they're not going to stop the conversation when you're in Germany and say, no, you're wrong, it's masculine, not feminine. They let it go. And I just want to be able to converse. Don't get me wrong, it's important to know correct grammar, but it's not the be all and end all. And I think you've just got to, I've benefited from just being allowed to talk, mistakes and all, and people forgive me. Well, there's nothing to forgive, but people oversee the mistakes when you're abroad, and because as long as you can make yourself understood. Indeed. But the key to that is having the confidence. And if you're interrupted, for me, if you're interrupted every 4 or 5 words, you never get that confidence.
It just doesn't work. Yeah. What's your biggest, challenge right now?
Motivation sometimes, and that comes. Doing it again. But you just got to keep doing it, and you've got to find a way to motivate yourself to do it. And I think, seeing that, when you do converse with your colleagues or whoever, people you're doing business with, whatever it might be, clients, you see that improvement, and people do say, it's getting better or whatever.
Indeed. And what aspect do you like the most about it, about the whole language learning journey, or?
To prove to myself that I can do it. School was important, but it's not as important, or wasn't as important then as it is now for people. And that seems an odd thing to say, but it really wasn't 30 years ago. And for me to prove that I can try and master something is that's the challenge now, not to let it go, to keep going. And it's just, I wouldn't call it a language bug particularly, but I want to see it through and be the best I can at it, and I'll never be fluent, as Gabby suggests, but, fluent is how I'm speaking in English now, and I'll never be like that in German, unless I went to live there, which is unlikely. But and I think to be fluent, you really need to go and live in a country, and, whether that's for, if you've got a good grounding, maybe it takes you 3 months to be fluent. If you speak no language at all, it probably takes you at least a year, but you need to immerse yourself in that culture a bit. You need to read it every day. You need to hear it every day. You need to watch it on the telly every day.
Clearly, and immerse yourself as much as possible. I mean, nothing compares to that. But there is something that you mentioned to me a few months ago or years ago maybe, that I think points to the fact that there is something about this fluency, and you, namely. I remember you talking about an instance where you were thinking in German, or when you walk on the street and your thoughts start to wander and you catch yourself thinking in German.
Yeah, I do occasionally.
How does that happen?
I don't know. I'm worried about it. I got home from my last trip and I spoke in German to my family, and they looked at me as I'd come from another planet. So
how interesting. Yeah. There is something about it, and I have similar experiences as well. Okay, with 3 languages, but I totally get what you mean, and also I catch myself and also my husband that we dream in English. So there is something about.
I haven't got that far yet. No.
That's the next bit, and then we can really say you're fluent, huh?
Yeah.
Right. Now, trips to Germany. How often do you travel?
Probably only a couple of times a year.
Right. How do you have any tips as to when someone travels to a German-speaking country on business in particular, then how to approach, and also working with Germans, how to approach this thing? Do you have any interesting stories maybe to share, or something that the Germans you find are very picky about, and we should be a bit more careful with this topic, with that topic? Is there anything that you found
there's lots of jokes about that kind of stuff, isn't there? I'm not going to go into that. But look, be on time, be polite. And one thing as well, I think, as an Englishman, you have a conversation, you're forever interjecting each other's conversation. From my experience anyway, they don't like being interrupted, and they're making a point, and I might start speaking to them, and they not get annoyed so much, but they find it odd that you would interrupt before they've finished saying what they're saying, and then you agree with them. So don't interject too much, listen to what they're saying and then answer rather than interject too much. Okay, it's probably different down the pub, but on a business level, then that's a bit of advice that I would give. And as I said, be punctual. That's another key thing. But that's nothing to do with language, really. That's a cultural cultural thing.
Yeah.
And
now you have also worked for a Japanese company back in the day. Like, how did you see the Japanese working culture? Was it any different to the German company, or?
I never visited Japan, but obviously there was a lot of Japanese expats working over here, and it's hard. I mean, there are totally different cultures. I mean, they're a very hierarchical society, and how they addressed each other, and it was very much, if you were slightly senior to them, you would say Mr. So and so rather than just that Christian name. So. They're a quieter race, they're perhaps a bit more, I'm not comparing them to Germans particularly, but quite respectful in comparison to us English anyway, that's for sure. And I enjoyed working for them, but the jobs were different then as well. So
cool, okay.
It's not easily translatable, because it was 20 years ago. So
now back to German. Do you have a favorite German phrase or expression or something that you particularly like?
Oh, blimey. Now you put me on the spot. Of course, Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude is a good word now.
It's all very topical at the moment, of course.
Because of the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Germany just went out. It was an Auf Wiedersehen moment for the Germans.
Yeah, no, there's a few, but they're not instantly translatable. I find a lot of phrases that er hat eine Haare in der Suppe,
Yes.
but
Hair in the soup, yeah. Do you say that in English as well, or do you have a similar?
nothing's right. He's always moaning, or they're not always instantly translatable.
Of course.
So
you're right.
It's a bit tough on that one. But,
Cool.
yeah.
Okay, I like it. Now, to wrap it up,
okay.
what what advice would you give to the listeners contemplating to learn a language as a Brit or as an English native? Is it manageable? Is it something that they can really accomplish?
Oh, of course you can accomplish it, but you've got to have the motivation to do it, and you've got to do your house of Garber, which has not always been the case with me. That's homework for those that don't know, but yeah, you do have to put the work in, and it's not easy. You do have to find the time, and I try and designate some time on a train journey home, but it's not always. I haven't had a good day, then I don't want to be doing homework or thinking German. So you do have to put it in, and you've got to want to learn it. What are you learning it for? Is it just I'll try and do it in a couple of years? Then you won't do it. If it's because you want to improve your German, or you want to the challenge like me of learning a new language, then that's you should try and do it. But it is realistic. Look, if I can do it, then anyone can do it. Really, I mean that's. And I don't say that lightly or in a frivolous nature. People can. But you've got to work at it. But for me, the big thing is having that confidence to go out there and actually use it. Don't be afraid. People don't laugh at you. However much you think, oh my goodness, I'm going to embarrass myself. I'm going to look like a right wally. Okay, you might now and again, but no one laughs at you for trying. That's for sure. From my point of view, if a foreign national came to this country and started to just speak English and made a mistake, I wouldn't just point my finger and laugh at them. I'd try and help them out. That's for sure. And, the same with, certainly in my case, that's my experience. But you just got to have the confidence to go out there and do it. And, mistakes and all, that's the only way you learn.
Cool. Okay. Well, we will finish this off now with a quick fire. I prepared a list of, I was kind of in trouble because I wasn't sure what sorts of questions to prepare, but we will make it quick, okay?
Go on then.
London or Frankfurt?
London.
Frankfurt or Berlin?
Berlin.
Why is that?
I had a good time in the World Cup in 2006 there.
Nice. Cider or apple wine?
Neither.
Why is that?
I got drunk on cider the first time. You never go back to the drink you got
Bad
first drunk.
memories.
Yeah.
Tea with lemon or tea with milk?
Milk.
So you're a proper Englishman then.
I drink coffee though. So.
Nice. Currywurst or English sausage?
Oh, goodness me.
Have you tried the
Bratwurst.
currywurst? Bratwurst, yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, football. Bayern München or Manchester United?
Neither.
Why is that?
I don't like them.
Full stop. Well, thank you very much, James, for taking the time to have a chat with me, and wishing you all the best on your language learning journey.
Pleasure, and thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much for tuning into this episode. And finally, just a couple of words about the sponsor of this podcast, ProLingua Global. We are a London-based boutique language training company, and we developed a unique 5-step language coaching program that is all about making the language learning process speedy, easy, but also enjoyable and highly effective. And therefore, it really meets the needs of busy executives and business people. Our typical clients work in the financial services industry. Natural conversations are at the core of the process, which makes the whole experience very relaxed, authentic, and lifelike. And what we realize is that with the help of these programs, clients start to communicate more effectively and productively with foreign colleagues and partners. They feel more confident when speaking in the target language. They are able to follow conversations and talk freely in important situations. Plus, they also learn to understand cultural nuances and implications. The ProLingua Global Language Coaching programs are now available in numerous languages. And our overall mission is to help strengthen international business and trade relationships and directly contributing to British businesses becoming more successful in the short and long run. You can find out more on www.prolingua.global. My name is Gabriella Ferenzi, and you can find me personally on Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn, and also on my personal website. Thank you very much for listening.